着いたぞ、桐生。
Disclaimer, this video is not an attack on Vivian Medrano or any of the talented writers, artists, animators, and voice actors who helped bring Hazbin Hotel to life. The reason I'm opening on this disclaimer is because the last time I made a loving and tame critique of Vivziepop's work as a fan of hers, I was met with a shocking amount of hostility that some of you watching may be aware about due to the collective outrage many people had over the behavior of these fans, and the fact that whenever discussions surrounding the fanbase happens, my name tends to pop up because of the severity of the harassment. While this clearly doesn't reflect the majority of the fanbase, and I'm incredibly grateful for the overwhelming amount of support I received, I want to make it clear to any Hazbin Hotel fans that if you disagree with anything I have to say in this video, then that is totally fine. I'm not here to flippin' orbital strike the funny hell show. This video comes from someone who loved Vivziepop's work for many years and waited just as long as you did for Hazbin Hotel to finally flourish on TV. Now, with that out of the way, Hazbin Hotel. Not that one. Hazbin Hotel started as an independently funded pilot uploaded to YouTube. The 10% if you are 13, you should know this already. It was eventually picked up by A24, got delayed by 6 months, then finally released on Amazon Prime a few weeks ago of the first 4 episodes, then releasing the final 4 in batches of 2 over a couple of weeks that followed. And to say this show has been highly anticipated is putting it lightly. Hazbin is a project that's been in the works for about a decade at this point, from being conceptualized during the early days of Vivziepop's YouTube career to the pilot being uploaded to YouTube, and now making waves on streaming. And it's been said before, but you cannot take away how amazing of a success story this is for any indie creator out there. It's a new standard and reinvigorating for anyone who dreams of having their passion, love, and hard work recognized by the mainstream, and it's hard not to admire Hazbin for that fact alone, even if that one Digital Circus parody is funnier than anything to come from this franchise. When I inevitably die of a gas leak, I want "My name is Kane and I am your bitch" written as my epitaph. However, while the show has enjoyed its fair share of praise, it has also been the subject of many frustrating debates and controversies, on top of many people giving their critiques of the series with far less sugarcoating now that it's officially no longer an indie project, and can finally be held up to the same standards as other adult animated shows. This is to say, Hazbin Hotel is very divisive, and combined with the number of controversies it's had, as well as some of Vivian's behavior in response to criticism thrown at the show, it's really not helping at all. Now, speaking as someone who's been a fan of Vivzie for nearly 6 years now, though I have stopped watching Hell of a Boss because of reasons specified earlier, I was still excited to see the series for the sole reason of its existence being a genuine marvel, and I wanted to see how Vivzie fleshed out all that was presented in the pilot into a full series. And after finishing all 8 episodes, while I can say I don't dislike Hazbin at all, and have a fair few things to applaud it for, there's a lot to critique. Because while its existence may be impressive, Hazbin Hotel is no longer an indie project. Critiques of it that may have been viewed as invalid in the past because of it being a YouTube pilot are now far more important to address, if the show ever continues or Vivzie makes more shows in the future. Because truthfully, Hazbin Hotel is a mess. A beautiful one that I enjoyed overall, but even if you love the show, there's no denying how big a lot of its flaws are, to the point where I've seen a lot of my peers who have praised and made several videos on Helliver and Hazbin respectively also call out some of these issues. I'll try and keep this video as brief as I can. Sorry, that's funny. And I hope that even if you love this show, you can at least see where I'm coming from. But before we get into the show itself, it's important we look back on the show as pilot, because a lot of what I'm about to say will involve drawing comparisons and providing context for why some things about the series are a little disappointing. When the pilot first dropped, it shocked a lot of people with how well made it was. Like, even for independent animation on YouTube, there is rarely anything that matched the sheer quality of Hazbin's animation. Say whatever you want about the character designs or why Alistair looks like this, but you can't deny that the incredibly fluid, detailed, and colourful visuals gave the series a lot of appeal, and it was one of the main things people praised about it. But it also hooked plenty of people because, as a pilot, it had an incredibly interesting premise and a fascinating vision of what hell in this universe is like. There's a pretty good amount of world building in Hazbin Hotel without it needing to exposit a ton of unnecessary details or going on 5-minute yapping sessions. Like, yeah, I didn't have a problem with them just spoon-feeding a bunch of info about Alistair out of nowhere, because 1, it was a pilot, it had to include it somewhere, and 2, I just finished playing Persona 3 Reload. I think you can gauge my tolerance for exposition from that alone. A lot about the world is effectively communicated without it being overbearing, and the opening scene especially is a fantastic case of show don't tell. I know it's easy for people to dunk on Hazbin nowadays, but you gotta understand that there's a reason people flock to it by the millions. It was a very well made pilot with a lot of strengths. Plenty of weaknesses too, let's not get it twisted. You do not know how much restraint it takes to not make a written by Vivziepop joke again, but I'll stop being a dick now. Plenty of questions were raised, theories were made, rest in peace MatPat. Wait, did he actually? And generally, the concept of the Princess of Hell running a hotel that rehabilitates sinners sounds like a great concept for a cartoon. It didn't need to necessarily be story-focused or episodic. The concept alone was fun and interesting. It's not like they were making a show about hell going to war with heaven. It was confident enough in this cool premise and didn't need something that bombastic. This is a joke about foreshadowing. For those who don't get the joke. It's important we acknowledge the strengths of the pilot before going into the actual series, because there was a lot riding on Hazbin in terms of people's expectations. Plot points were established, mysteries were set up, the premise was intriguing and promised a show about redeeming sinners. Now imagine you have no knowledge of Hazbin Hotel or VivziePop at all, and you're watching this pilot for the first time again. Is it much of a stretch to say that most people would have expected a full series about rehabilitating sinners, with story elements going on in the background that later built up to a story-focused conclusion? Because that's what I expected, and from what I gathered, that seemed to be what most, if not everyone, was expecting. And well, when you switch up on your premise that was known for years in the first episode, it can be a little bit confusing, especially if it isn't handled gracefully. You see, the joke is that I have more to say on this in the next section with further elaboration, but I do want to use this as an example of just how different the pilot and series are, though I guess a better comparison would be in the animation department. Hazbin's pilot wasn't super clean or perfect, but for an indie production, the animation was incredibly fluid. Now obviously there was going to be differences given the full series was given a fixed budget, whereas Hazbin was mostly funded through Vivzie's Patreon, and they were allowed to work on it for however long they wanted until it was finished. But even still, it's hard not to compare the two and be a little bit sad. It's not bad animation, but it is considerably choppier, with a lot more animation errors. Everyone knows about Vaggie just wing gastering between shots for some reason, but there's a lot of janky camera movement, angel dust arms presumably falling off between shots. It's not the best. Benzobox have done some good stuff before, but if I'm being entirely honest, expecting the same studio that produced Border Town to comprehend VivziePop's character designs might have been slightly insane. Even with the show's redesigns of these characters, they still look very difficult to animate. No wonder Angel's arms keep entering hammer space. I'm not even an animator, and looking at the design has me yearning for the coal mines as an alternate way to make a living. Anyway, I wanted to briefly touch on some differences before we get into the major stuff, because a lot of the things the pilot sets up aren't done a whole lot of justice, and I really want to get into this with proper context.
An extermination to ensure hell and its sinners could never rise against them.
Congratulations to this one single line for temporarily changing the taste of food for the next 4 weeks of my life. Before we begin, I want to address the fact that a lot of the issues I'm about to bring up are most likely caused by this show's criminally short episode count. You're telling me we waited 5 years for 8 episodes? I'm placing you f***ers under arrest. Hazbin is a super ambitious series, and it's evident from the extremely fast pacing and many problems with the story that not all of this was the fault of the writers. I just want to acknowledge this, because even still, it is 100% possible for them to tell a story in a way that doesn't feel like I'm tuning into an XQC stream, and that's by scaling back the ambition. I get that they wanted to do as much as they could with the time they had, because you can never be sure if your show is going to get canned out of nowhere these days, but they were 100% capable of making Hazbin's story far more digestible, and I want people to be aware of that. I sympathize with the struggles faced during production, but it's not unreasonable to consider what could have been. Anyway, time to get into the actual episodes. I want to try and list the things I like about the show's episodes first before I critique them, mainly because I want to remind everyone that yes, I do actually like things, and also making it clear that Hazbin Hotel does have qualities that I think more people should at least acknowledge. For starters, I think the show does a great job at building on the pilot's introduction to the main cast of characters, and showing their dynamics in more detail, while also expanding on the story in new and interesting ways, giving us more details about the world, Charlie's family, and the history between heaven and hell, respectively. It is pretty quick, to be generous, I'll just call that advanced foreshadowing, but it's still something to take note of. Also, the new voice cast. When the decision to recast every single character was announced, there was a lot of disappointment going around, and it's hard not to see why. When you consider the pilot is currently sitting at around 100 million views, how iconic and memorable these voices have become starts to set in. And even now, it's really hard to imagine these characters sounding any differently. The pilot performances were just that good, so choosing to replace them with big-name Broadway stars was definitely going to be a problem for many. Obviously, there was a fat chance in Double Hell that a few of the VAs were going to stay for the main show. Like, I don't think anyone is shocked at Sir Pentious being recasted given the current state of Stamper's career and all the stuff he's been up to. He seems great. There's a whole conversation about the treatment of professional voice actors and whatnot, Chris Pratt and all that, but considering all of this, I was still pretty shocked at how well all the actors in this show do with these characters. Most of them are admittedly trying to mimic the voices of the OG VAs, which kinda makes you ask what the point of the swap was in the first place, but it's hard to deny that all of these guys and gals can voice act worth a damn, and I actually preferred some voices over the ones from the pilots. I specifically really like the lighter tone of voice that Alistair has, just makes him come off as a bit more playful. There are some performances that are notably different, Keith David as Husker and Christina Christina Alabado as Cherry Bomb are definitely going in vastly different directions to the pilot, but they still sound really good. I'm not sure how I feel about Blake Roman as Angel Dust though. On one hand, he's definitely basing his performance on Michael Kovacs from the pilot, but I notice he tends to really exaggerate the accent, and the higher pitched voice on top of that can feel a little off. Meanwhile, Stephanie Beatrice as Vaggie has the opposite problem, where most of the time she just sounds really bored. But overall, the vocal performances are solid all around. I don't have many complaints. And man, can these people sing. Alex Brightman, my beloved. As much as I find Adam to be an obnoxious character, Alex put his whole bright tussie into okay, I need to chill out. I have my reservations about this show's musical numbers, but I'd be lying if I said the actors didn't pour their hearts into these lyrics and at least managed to make them sound good. These vaults also extended to episode 2 for the most part, although I'll just say right now that episode 2 is vastly superior to episode 1 for a multitude of reasons, and here's where I'm gonna have to start being a bit of a dick, because for as much as I like what they try to do here, episode 1 is kinda shit. The biggest problem for me is the extremely weird disconnect yet weird connection that the show has to the original pilot. I think a lot of people, including myself, expected the first episode of Hazbin to be a reintroduction to the series, doing everything that the pilot did but with a touch more refinement, introducing the characters, the world, the plot and central conflict of the series, etc. Basically just remaking the pilot as a fully fledged episode of a TV show. That's what a lot of shows tend to do. Two best examples I can think of are Sherlock and Gravity Falls, which both remade their pilots as the first episodes of their respective shows. Although in Sherlock's case the pilot was better and the actual episode 1 felt like headbutting a belt sander for 60 minutes, with Hazbin No, it becomes incredibly apparent only a few minutes into the first episode that the show is still treating the events of the pilot as canon. Now there'd be nothing wrong with this if the pilot was listed with the rest of the episodes on Amazon Prime, but it isn't. And this creates a lot of issues given the show is now on TV and reaching a much wider audience than it did previously. And the weirdest thing is that it feels like the show is both aware and completely oblivious to this fact at the same time. The first episode opens with a cute animated sequence that's stylistically similar to the one from the pilot and effectively treats it like an opener to the show. However, instead of it being about Charlie's plight and her pain regarding the exterminations in hell, it's instead about her father Lucifer and her mother Lilith, along with the creation of hell itself, its own interpretation of Adam and Eve, and the true reasoning behind the exterminations, being that they're done as a way to make sure hell can never rise against heaven. Side note, keep track of the reasoning behind the exterminations for a sec, because this being shown off at the very beginning of the show is arguably the biggest mistake the show makes in regards to its storytelling, and it makes me want to throw a chair at a toddler. This opening is clearly intended to be a way to introduce new viewers to the world of Hazbin Hotel, and it works pretty well, until you remember about 2 minutes afterwards that they still treat the pilot as if it's already happened. All of the characters who were originally introduced are currently bumming at the hotel. Vaggie outright says that Alistair came to visit and help out like he did in the pilot about a week prior, and the rest of the episode essentially pretends it's an episode 2 to the pilot, when it should instead be filling the same role. Obviously, if you know the events of the pilot, this shouldn't be a problem, but considering it technically isn't part of the actual show anymore, it causes a lot of confusing problems and severely undercuts the experience for the average viewer who is completely unaware of the pilot's existence or just hasn't watched it. This is to say, Hazbin Hotel does not do a very good job of introducing its world and characters. Episode 1 is juggling a lot. Too much for 20 minutes of television, that's for sure. It goes from giving us background on Hell's creation and the exterminations, to reintroducing the characters, setting up the B-plot involving the hotel's commercial, setting up the A-plot with Charlie's meeting with Adam, setting up numerous mysteries such as Alistair's disappearance and the death of one of the angels, along with the reduced time until the next extermination, and then it has to fit in 2 musical numbers on top of that, and frankly this show's pacing is a bit of a train wreck because of this problem. Instead of it taking the time to rebuild the pilot and give us proper introductions to the world and characters, and then writing the rest of the show from there a lot more focused, it chooses to rush through every single plot point, character arc, basically everything, and it results in one huge mess. One that's enjoyable, no doubt, but it severely hinders the cohesion of the story, and doesn't allow for any moment to have an actual impact beyond the surface level. What makes this more confusing is that this was also a problem for Hell of a Boss, the spin-off series, though not quite on the same level. However, Vivzie herself confirmed that Helva's pilot was never actually canon.
What?
So, Helva's pilot isn't canon, but Hazbin still is? I think I'm gonna be sick. This is probably just a nitpick, but it does add an extra layer of confusion to this. But what's probably this episode's biggest and most frustrating sin is how it immediately proceeds to completely undermine the show's entire premise, and then sets up something entirely different. Remember that line in the opening? The one stating that the reason for the exterminations is so that heaven can keep their grip over hell and make sure no one ever rises against them? Yeah. The f*** you mean by that, exactly? In the pilot, which is supposedly still canon, it was commonly accepted and explained that the exterminations were done specifically to address the concerns of overpopulation in hell. Obviously, it doesn't take a genius to consider the possibility of this explanation being a front for something more sinister, but this explanation being what everyone believes would make the show's premise of redeeming sinners to give them a chance to go to heaven make perfect sense. No one has any reason to think that heaven would be deceitful about the purpose of the exterminations, so the hotel's existence and Charlie's optimism makes sense. And if you were going to build up to some kind of eventual conflict, you could later reveal towards the end of the season why the angels were really killing demons and will properly justify an actual conflict between heaven and hell, along with strengthening the resolve of the characters by testing if they've actually changed or if they'll slip back into being awful people knowing that everything turned out to be pointless. Hazbin Hotel Episode 1 instead blows its load immediately by telling us the real reason heaven does all of this is for the purposes of control and nothing else. And Charlie knows this. Everyone knows this. The whole point of the hotel was to address overpopulation. But that doesn't mean jack when everyone is 100% aware of the fact that the real problem is heaven itself and their need to maintain their power. So going by the events of the pilot, since it's still considered canon, Charlie spent all this time setting up this hotel to find a peaceful path to redemption that addresses the issue of overpopulation by hopefully getting the guests into heaven, argued about this on TV in front of the entire population, despite knowing the entire time that heaven does not care and is doing all this out of a need for power. Is she f***ing stupid? Revealing that heaven and the angels are evil right out the gate is such a ginormous conceptual mistake and feels like a massive bait and switch, changing the whole premise from a hotel that redeems sinners to war is hell. I'm having a bloody conniption, like what? Why? I must stress again that I do like this show overall, but I'm not going to pretend that this didn't bug me. It has been extremely frustrating to think about because it effectively turns the hotel, the main story engine of the series, into a side hustle. As while the series does show two characters slowly becoming better people, that's the extent of it, and the rest of the series leans heavily into the conflict between heaven and hell, and it's like, this was supposed to be about redeeming sinners. That's what we were promised for 5 years. That was the whole point! I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about the main aspect of the show being treated with the same depth as a Yakuza sub-story. Security system takes control! Look, I don't like episode 1 very much, and the rest of the show is leagues ahead of it in terms of quality. I apologize if this review of episode 1 ends up being the longest in comparison to the rest, but that's just because it's the catalyst for most of the show's issues. At the very least, the reveal of a dead angel is rather intriguing as a mystery, and a good cliffhanger to leave the episode on. As much as I don't agree with this new direction they're taking the story, I'll give them the credit for still making it intriguing. Now, episode 2 is actually pretty fun. I'll admit, I really liked episode 2, mostly because this is one of the few episodes that actually focuses on the redeeming sinners part of the show, but also because a lot of it is focused on Alistair, and I don't think it's a secret that he's the most popular character among fans right now. And he has been I'm gonna be 20 this year, for the past few years. As much as I honestly abhor Alistair's design and the very unsavory usage of voodoo symbols and imagery when it comes to his powers, it's hard to deny that he's a very fun character to watch when he's just Bugs Bunnying all over the place and toying with everyone he interacts with, and the mysteries surrounding his character are undoubtedly the most intriguing part of the show by a long shot, and I can say with conviction that he's one of the most fleshed out and compelling characters despite how little we actually know about him. It's also criminal that he never gets a single song to himself, not counting his part of the finale song in episode 8. Episode 2 reintroduces us to Sir Pentious and him being accepted into the hotel, kickstarting one of the few character arcs in the show that actually has a natural progression to it, while also properly introducing us to the V's, Vox, Velvet, and Valentino, 3 characters who longtime fans of Ipsy Pop should probably be familiar with, and while I have a lot to say regarding their presence, or rather lack thereof, in future episodes besides Valentino, the episode does a great job of quickly introducing them and showing off their personalities and mannerisms. The episode mainly focuses on Vox though, and his pretty entertaining rivalry with Alistair. We spend a good few minutes with him basically being on top of the world, chill, calculated, and even diffusing a violent Valentino having a tantrum, and then the moment Alistair is mentioned, the facade completely slips and we witness just how petty and insecure he really is, while Alistair completely schools him without even trying. Stayed Gone isn't exactly a great song, the flow and some of the lyrics utterly confounded me at points, but I won't lie, it's catchy as heck and it's a very entertaining sequence all around. Unfortunately, Vox and Alistair's rivalry is all but forgotten about from this point onwards until the finale, and it leads into my overall disappointment with the V's because the story just doesn't have enough time for them outside of Valentino given his connection to Angel's character arc. It would have been cool to see Vox and Alistair having a completely one-sided feud as a running joke, and it would have added a lot more weight to their future interactions and would lead to me not screaming, "Where have you been this whole time?" the moment Vox shows up in episode 8 completely unannounced. Still, if they really only had time to use Vox a grand total of once, I'm glad he was utilized like this. Pentious was a character that I was already pretty fond of based on how he was portrayed in the pilot, and the fact that he's also voiced by Alex Brightman genuinely blew blew my mind. This man's range is insane, and out of everyone in the main cast besides Alistair and Nifty, he's definitely a favourite of mine. We'll talk about this more when we get to the finale, but him slowly becoming a good person and relieving himself of being a joke villain is done very well, and he gets just enough screen time for it to work. Overall, I don't have nearly as much to say about episode 2 as I did for episode 1, because by all accounts it doesn't really do much wrong. It provides a solid and entertaining episode. God, I've already spent this much time just talking about the first 2 episodes. Let's move on. Depending on who you ask, episodes 3 and 4 are either the best or worst episodes of the entire show, and their reasoning for these thoughts is not exactly unfounded, specifically in episode 4's case, and I too have a lot to say about it. For now, let's stick to episode 3, which mainly focuses on Vaggie and continuing the plot from where it was left in episode 1, with the body of an angel being found after the extermination. First of all, Vaggie. My thoughts on this character can be summed up with a brief This is another problem with the show acting like the pilot is canon, because it keeps acting like we already know all of the characters, and even then, it's not like the pilot did a great job at fleshing everyone out. Heck, by the end it basically threw Alistair, Nifty, and Husker into the story because they were running out of time and had to establish them as characters. And with this problem, coupled with the cripplingly small number of episodes, comes the issue of the show consistently writing these massive and dramatic story reveals and character moments that mean absolutely nothing, because we don't know these people yet. This is only the 3rd episode. The idea of showing cracks in Charlie and Vaggie's relationship and questioning Vaggie's purpose beyond protecting her is a neat idea, but I really wish that in an ideal world it would have been addressed far later in the season and with a lot more episodes to add context. To go on a brief but related tangent, people tend to act like filler episodes are the death of all story-focused shows. People would rather watch the story stuff completely uninterrupted because they feel like their time is being wasted otherwise. And for some shows, like Star vs. the Forces of Evil and 90% of most anime, that's an entirely reasonable complaint. However, what people don't seem to realize is that the term filler episodes become insanely diluted as a critique. Actual filler episodes are often made without a distinct purpose beyond filling out space in the episode ordering when the writers don't know what to do otherwise. And it's usually very easy to tell when an episode is filler because after watching it, you're usually filled with a sense of, wow, I feel absolutely nothing after watching that. Thank you, Darren Nefsey, I am calling the police. I really need a better running joke, I swear to God. However, people these days tend to conflate filler with any episode that doesn't have the story as a main focus or it doesn't introduce anything new to the show. And I think that that's a massive over-exaggeration and that these episodes are, more often than not, 100% worth watching. If you just skipped all the story episodes and watched every episode where the plot moves forward, your investment in the show is guaranteed to not be as strong. A lot of shows have episodes that follow the characters having fun adventures divorced from the main story, and the entire point of these episodes is to endear you to them as well as showing off more of the world. Their entire point is to be entertaining adventures that add to your investment, which is why I get really annoyed when people ask me what filler episodes they should skip whenever they say they want to watch Gravity Falls or Adventure Time, because while I can't deny that some of Adventure Time could be considered filler, I know they're only asking me this because they want to focus exclusively on the episodes that match up for the main story, and by doing that they are missing out on so many good episodes and character moments. Hell, if you specifically stick to every episode of Gravity Falls that focuses on the main underlying plot, you'd be left with like half of the entire show, possibly less than that. So much of your emotional investment in TV shows comes from these entertaining distractions from the main plot. Seeing the characters have fun, having them go on their own smaller journeys that add further weight to their arcs, is a key part of any televised story. And while some shows are far more serious than others and manage to effectively showcase storytelling and character development in every single episode, such as Attack on Titan and Breaking Bad, there is nothing wrong with other shows doing this, and it certainly isn't filler. So getting back to Hazbin Hotel, I think you can see a massive problem, because when you look at it, Hazbin Hotel feels like you're watching a TV show with a cheat sheet that exclusively focuses on the story content, except that's just how the show is made, and it doesn't feel very good. We hardly have any time to really get to know Charlie and Vaggie before this episode, and it all feels rushed and unearned. Now onto the story stuff. Episode 1 ended with the mystery of the angel's death hanging in the air. Until now, we, and the people of Hell, have been under the impression that angels cannot be harmed nor killed, and it seems like Heaven themselves thought so too, as this one transgression, likely in self-defense, is not only enough for them to move the extermination up by 6 months, but also to plan a full genocide of Hell instead of just making sure there would be no overpopulation. This is a pretty effective cliffhanger, and we have no clue who could have done it, something that episode 3 builds up to as the angel's death is now brought to the attention of Hell's overlords as Velvet, one of the V's, tries to convince them all to rise up and fight against Heaven now that they know that angels are killable.
I did what I had to do. I am not discussing this.
Oh, you killed them. Huh. Well, phew, a mystery solved, right? It was getting a little too intense in here. I'm glad that's out in the open now. Just one small question. What the hell are you talking about? Who the f are you exactly? Another major consequence of the show having an extremely limited number of episodes has presented itself. We are at episode 3, and so much has been pumped into the viewer's minds by now, and it's nauseating. This is Carmilla Carmine, an overlord and the top weapons stealer in hell, and she is responsible for killing the angel in order to protect her daughters.
Who's to say who'd survive?
Now shut the fuck up, we are introduced to this character in this episode. We see nothing of her beforehand, and within minutes of being introduced, she gets a dramatic and emotional song about how she just wanted to protect her family. And I'm gonna be honest, when I watched this for the first time, I was bloody stun-locked. Sure, we know who you are, but we don't know you. Whatever effect this scene and this song was trying to have utterly fails because we don't know this person. She's introduced, gives up the game, and starts singing. And while this is happening, Maggie is also singing about her underdeveloped plights as well, and the two of them are having a duet for some reason. There hasn't been a connection established to these two characters yet, and there won't be for a few episodes now. So them having an emotional duet about both of their completely underdeveloped conflicts is incredibly jarring and unearned. Heck, as much as Velvet's song Respectless really annoyed me, which I can tell was sort of the point because of how on the nose the lyrics are, but still, it did a much better job at showing what Velvet's deal was while being super catchy. The only really interesting part of this episode is Alistair finding out that the angels can be harmed, and only because he's so mysterious as a character that we don't really know what he's going to do with that information yet. I did not care for episode 3 at all, and I really struggled to see what it was trying to do in some areas. Now we get to episode 4. I'm just gonna quickly put this disclaimer up because there's no way I can talk about this episode without getting into the subjects it covers, and if you're sensitive to any of this stuff, then feel free to click off the video. Okay, no more jokes until we're done with this, no more poking fun, I need to be honest here. As much as I enjoy this series and many aspects of it, I am not a fan of how Hazbin Hotel treats the subject of SA. Before we get into that, I want to go over some brief positives. As much as I really don't like the lyrics and the visuals of the song Loser Baby, I won't deny that it's an incredibly catchy song and is born out of good intentions. Keep David and Blake Roman knocked this song out of the park with their vocals, and I would not feel the same way I do about it if they hadn't tried their best. I also just like that this episode sets up Angel and Husker's relationship so well, and seeing them bond over the rest of the series is pretty touching. Okay, now, out of all of the controversies that spawn from this show, this is probably the largest one. A lot of people are angry and have gotten angry at how this show portrays Angel Dust and SA in general, for reasons that are within the show itself, and for stuff that happened behind the scenes. As much as I want to solely zone in on what the actual show is communicating, knowing that one of the people who worked on this episode, specifically the poison sequence, is an unabashed fetishist who unironically ships Angel Dust and Valentino together, and has not actually been through SA themselves, puts a truly horrid taste in my mouth. Knowing that someone who sees one of the absolute worst things a person can ever be put through as a fetish was working on this show, and specifically the episode that addresses the subject, is vile. There's no other word for it. And while I do truly believe that Vivzy was trying to treat the subject with the seriousness it deserves, her defense of this person hasn't been great, and her making an awkward joke while hyping people up for the full poison sequence to come out was really gross. While I haven't had the misfortune of being a victim of SA myself, I have so many friends in my life who have had to endure some of the absolute worst torment a human being could ever be put through at the hands of their assaulters. I recognize that this was all a slip up on Viv's part, but this is a serious subject and should be treated as such. As for the actual depiction of the subject within the show, people are going to have their own interpretations of it, and there's clearly a split between people who have been victims of SA liking the episode and victims of SA who hate it. And I don't want to invalidate anything anyone has to say in regards to the episode's treatment of the subject, especially when I'm not a victim myself, but I still want to weigh in on the execution as someone who's had to talk to and be there for a lot of victims myself. I'm very happy that the show truly shows how much of a monster Valentino is without sugarcoating anything. He's a complete and utter bastard, and regardless of whoever worked on the episode behind the scenes, his relationship towards Angel Dust is nothing short of abusive and not shown in a positive light, and the abuse itself is shocking to look at. In a series full of blood and over-the-top violence, seeing a realistic display of abuse is shocking and incredibly effective. The episode properly grounds itself with a much more serious tone this way, and I think this was the right call. What most people have a problem with is the poison sequence, and while I agree that this is in character for Angel, it's still a lot. And while I don't think it's nearly as bad as people were saying it was, it's still a very hard scene to watch, and I personally don't think the upbeat pop song angle was the best way they could have done this. What really me off though is Loser Baby. As much as this song is catchy and as much as the vocals absolutely slay, I really hate this song. I get the point it's trying to make and how it shows Angel and Husker bonding, and how it's supposed to start sort of mean-spirited before its actual more wholesome meaning is shown in the latter half. I get all of that, but considering Angel is in one of the worst positions a person could ever be in, is completely traumatized and in pain after years of being assaulted and physically and emotionally abused, having the song just call him and Husker losers despite how drastically different their situations are really doesn't sit right with me. Yes, Husker is a damaged character too and is also on a demon's leash like Angel is, but acting as if him losing his freedom and power to a gambling addiction is at all comparable to the absolute hell that Angel has been through is just... I hate it. I really hate it. I get that Angel wouldn't have accepted a super mushy song to lift his spirits, but this really didn't hit with me. Hazbin's treatment of this subject is only going to get worse from here on out. I really don't want to get into the scene in episode 6 where Pen just gets dragged into this room and it's treated as a joke, but I just want to get it out of the way here that I'm really not a fan of how all of this has been treated in the show and behind the scenes. I'm aware that there are a lot of victims who see themselves in Angel and find this episode powerful, and that's totally valid. I'm just saying that personally, I think they could have handled this a lot better. That's all I really have to say about episode 4, honestly. It's definitely the most contentious one in the series, and I don't blame anyone who felt uncomfortable watching it. It's a very hard episode to talk about for many while trying to keep your emotions in check. Alright, let's lighten this video's tone back up. Thankfully, episodes 5 and 6 are pretty enjoyable. I wouldn't say they're great, they're alright as far as episodes go, but I do want to keep reminding people that while I am a little harsh on the show, I do enjoy it. I see the potential behind each episode, and the moments where the stars align and the show's strengths are allowed to flourish are euphoric as someone who's been waiting 5 years for it. But I have to call out issues when I see them. Speaking of which, episode 5 was confusing. First of all, I'm sure plenty of people have pointed this out already, but it is a little funny that this is the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th instance of daddy issues across the Helliverse at this point. It's starting to get a little bit stale and incredibly funny whenever it happens, especially with how Lucifer is just the exact same kind of character that Stolas and Blitz are, just with the dorkiness cranked all the way up to 11. He's fun to watch and you can't help but root for him, but I definitely rolled my eyes a bit when I realized that Lucifer was just another quirky, distant father trying his best. That being said, his duet with Alistair was fun. I honestly don't have many complaints with the music itself, it's an easy listen. The episode gets points just for casting Sarah Stiles as Mimsy. Once again, Alistair in general is just a highlight of the episode, but while his pettiness towards Lucifer is pretty funny, I was still pretty confused. Alistair's reasoning for why he starts playing up the paternal role towards Charlie just to get under Lucifer's skin is a little unclear, and you couldn't really be blamed if you thought he was genuinely feeling jealousy towards him. This is an instance of Alistair just being petty because underneath the smile and the persona he's crafted for himself, he cares a lot about his own reputation and doesn't take it well when people don't seem to respect it or have any interest in him. With that context in mind, him playing up the father figure role in his duet just to make Lucifer mad is extremely funny, but it's very easy to be confused what its actual angle is when his first reaction when Lucifer walks into the hotel is to twitch his eyes in rage. Still though, Alistair is once again the best part of the show, and I'm gonna be honest, his scene with Husker might be the best scene in the whole show. It's not even a minute long, but this one scene is probably the most stable and well executed so far, playing up the mystery of Alistair's 7-year absence once again, while having Husker casually drop the fact that Alistair is also on someone's leash in a way that feels completely natural. And Alistair immediately going full horror on Husker in response to this was perfectly done. Weird how when you put two of the best characters in a room together and have them chat for 30 seconds, you get one of the best scenes in the show. Still, the show is greatly suffering from its episode count again and its rushed pacing. As well, the scene and song where Charlie and Lucifer reconcile is incredibly sweet and looks absolutely gorgeous. It's once again a scene that the show hasn't earned yet, like with Vaggie and Carmilla. Lucifer is introduced in this very episode, and they speedrun his and Charlie's issues in record time. I just can't find the ability to care for this. I just hope they get better with this, really. I mean, they can't find any more bombshells to suddenly drop on the audience with no— I hide the fact that you're an angel just right. Right, that's it, I'm calling an exorcist. Episode 6 is a Rubik's Cube of shitfuck. It's held together with scotch tape and dreams. Disheveled ones. Fun as it may be, this is arguably as egregious as Carmilla's ordeal in episode 3, except it's done thrice in the same episode. The reveal that Vaggie is an angel, the reveal that the rest of heaven doesn't know about the exterminations, and the sudden character pole vaulting that is Angel Dust's development. First off, heaven.
St. Peter, we can take it from here.
St. Peter? Why is he a fucking Aryan? Heaven not knowing about the exterminations and it only being known by the top angels and the actual extermination force in Adam is a fine enough explanation and proves that not all of heaven is filled with douchebags, and that there are in fact good angels who truly believe in heaven's values, whatever those are. But this is still a sudden reveal, and if you want to talk about sudden reveals, Vaggie, what the f— It's been theorized for a while that Vaggie has been an angel all along. I mean, it's not really a massive mystery if you just pay attention to her design, something the next episode blatantly calls attention to.
You have a giant X over your eye and wield an angelic spear. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, okay, thanks, but there is once again no build up to this reveal. This is the first time Adam has shown up since episode 1. If we had more scenes with him, this would also aid the reveal. The show, once again, lacks sufficient context to get us acquainted enough with the characters in order for us to care when bombshell reveals are dropped on us left and right. This feels completely out of left field. Even if you were taking in the hints towards Vaggie being an angel beforehand, it's just so rushed. And then there's angel dust. In order to convince Heaven that sinners can in fact be redeemed and strive to become better people, Charlie chooses Angel as an example, despite the fact that episode 4 was the beginning of his arc, and within only 2 episodes enough time has passed to the point where he has completely given up taking drugs, has retired many of his bad habits, and is just an all-around decent guy. How much time has passed exactly?
A man only lives once, we'll see you in 1 month.
Wait, 1 month until the extermination? You're telling me that 5 months have passed since the first episode? What? And since the ending of episode 5 directly leads into 6, that means that by episode 5 months have passed. This is a masterpiece of catastrophe. The passage of time in the show is an anomaly. Hazbin needed more episodes, man. This is insane. There's no problem with showing a large passage of time in only a few episodes, but everything here feels so artificial. The characters have progressed completely off screen. Christ, You Didn't Know is also a mess of a song despite all the voice actors killing it once again. The song Calling Back to Hell is Forever from the first episode is a nice touch, but it sounds super messy, with Charlie and Emily's voices struggling to remain in sync. I guess I should have been more clear. While I enjoy both episodes, it's episode 5 that I think is decent. 6 is alright, but has a ton of problems. We are at the finale now, and honestly, these 2 episodes might just be the strongest of the bunch. Not without their flaws and whatnot, but if you were to ask me if Hazbin Hotel stuck the landing, I'd probably say it did. Not against the lofty expectations I had for it, but in terms of it ending in a way that isn't a total catastrophe and actually setting up the next season well, I think it does a pretty okay job. First of all, the songs are at their peak here. Ready for This is just straight up fantastic, and the finale song is great minus the V's part. I really appreciated how the situation between Charlie and Vaggie was handled, with her slowly getting over the shock of the angel reveal and realizing that all Vaggie has ever done is be there for her and the hotel. It was sweet, I liked it. Especially given there isn't really anything to Charlie and Vaggie's relationship until the finale. Like, when people call this unseasoned Yuri, they're not kidding. This is one of the most sourceless relationships I've ever seen in a TV show. It's not very compelling, and they don't really spend enough time actually being a believable couple to get me to care about the angel reveal on any level, but they still handled it well. Alistair is still at his absolute best here, and you can tell just how much the writers like him too, but while his shenanigans are always going to be fun, it does feel like they're a little indecisive of where to take him as a character. Like, obviously Alistair is not a good guy and he has his own schemes going on, where he's been for 7 years as a mystery, and it lining up with Lilith's disappearance is surely not a coincidence. The dude isn't good, but they still take the time to show him being a genuine asset to Charlie and the hotel, giving sound advice and helping out where he can, etc. Heck, episode 5 basically spent its whole runtime trying to show that Charlie was fond of Alistair and that he had a more active protective role in her life than Lucifer ever did, even choosing the hotel over Mimsy despite her being a longtime friend of his back when he was still alive. These are good moments in isolation and could be the setup for an arc where Alistair starts pretending to be chummy with everyone but still has his own agenda, only to accidentally begin genuinely caring for everyone and either slip back into villainy or going in a different direction. Instead, as evidenced by this line here,
Oh, f you, Alistair. All you do is stand there smiling while you watch us struggle and fail.
it's not very clear what they're trying to do with him. He's still the most active and compelling mystery in the show, but having Charlie say this only a few episodes after she was treating him with the utmost respect in comparison to her own father gives me the impression that they're not being very consistent with him. And honestly, I don't mind if he becomes a good guy or goes down the path of straight up villainy, but they need to stop giving mixed signals, honestly. And this is an issue with most of Hazbin, honestly. A lot of the moments are fantastic in isolation, just really, really good, but without any actual context leading up to them, they just ring hollow. Other than that, Alistair is still the best part of the entire show and is the only character to actually make me laugh when he swears, because he usually never does. There's a whole debate on how funny Hazbin Hotel actually is, and I'll be honest, no, the series is not particularly funny. Alistair and Nifty are the funniest characters by a long shot because Alistair's with people is just naturally amusing, and every joke with Nifty is an actual joke. The show is very aware of the critiques people throw at it for being comprised of swearing and jokes, and that's all fine and dandy, but I still think it's perfectly fine criticism to have, because even though they definitely play into the bit, it does get very excessive and at times just straight up annoying. Back onto things I like, Rosie. Rosie's cool. I like Rosie. She serves her purpose in the episode very well. The animation for the fight scenes is cool, not many complaints there. I do find it a little questionable why Vaggie is surprised that angels can be harmed by angelic weapons, considering the reason she's missing an eye in her wing is because they were taken off by angelic weapons, but that's just a nitpick. They managed to make me like Carmilla. I still wish she had any actual screen time in the story besides episode 3, but her training Vaggie and her presence in the scene in general did more than enough to get me to like her. The finale in general was rather solid, honestly, or at least as solid as it could have been, considering the rest of the series was a pretty rocky foundation to build a conclusion on. I think the main two things I hate in the finale though is the death of Sir Pentious and how the story treated the V's. Now Pentious 100% goes out like a Chad, but having his death basically be a joke didn't really sit right, especially when they immediately try playing it up as an emotional death right after. It just doesn't work. Although Pentious actually making it into heaven is a great way to end the series, showing that Charlie was right in episode 6, and you can see it on Emily and Sarah's faces. Emily looks on with joy and excitement while Sarah immediately realizes that the exterminations were all needlessly cruel and that she was wrong. Would really like to see how this plays out next season. The V's are just a massive missed opportunity besides Valentino. Vox and Velvet both disappear from the plot after episode 2 and 3, and I can't say they added much to this episode besides Vox's incredibly try-hard commentary that wants you to laugh at the fact that he keeps amping his excitement and vulgarity up every time we snap back to him, but it's just an annoying distraction from the vastly superior plot going on while this is happening. Also, their part of the finale song is just really stupid. They act like the extermination actually happened for some reason, as if it wasn't stopped dead in its tracks. Adam literally said he'd be going for the hotel first and nothing else, and we see later on the rest of hell is completely unscathed. None of the overlords we know are in any danger, yet for some reason there's now this sudden power gap that the V's are aiming for, and a bunch of overlords perished or something. I don't know if this song was written before the episode was, or if there was some miscommunication or whatever the but it's extremely confusing and just makes me confused of what the point of the V's was in this episode. They show up, do nothing, then celebrate a power gap that we didn't even see be created and in no way could have been created. Season 2 better utilize them more because I was not impressed by these guys by the finale. I don't have much else to say here to be honest, because the finale, I'm counting episode 7 and 8 as the finale, was fairly solid. There were plenty of things I liked, and while there was a lot of stuff I felt was half-baked, it didn't subtract from my enjoyment. Overall, Hazbin Hotel, for as much of a triumph as it is for indie creators and for all of the praise I have for it even existing in the first place, is a deeply conflicting show. One that many openly love and will continue to support, and personally I hope Vivzy keeps on making stuff and improving her writing for television if Hazbin miraculously gets picked up for another season, or she decides to work on something new, wait never mind. But it's hard to turn a blind eye to the amount of missed potential there is here, and I get that it wasn't entirely Vivzy's fault. I'm sure if she had as many episodes as she wanted, she'd be able to write a story truly worthy of the incredible premise and scope she had in mind. Hazbin Hotel is nothing if not ambitious, but at the end of the day, ambition can only get you so far when the end result is still half-baked. There's a lot of love put into this show, and I can see that. Anyone with an eye for a show with an actual beating heart that isn't made corporately sterile can see that. But as someone who waited years for the show to come out, while I like the result overall and I'll tune in for the next season, it's hard not to be disappointed by how rushed the story and character development is, how it handles incredibly sensitive subjects that mean a lot to me and many of the people I care for, and knowing that I'm walking on eggshells by critiquing the show in the first place honestly speaks volumes. A lot of people I greatly respect in this community get thrown their way for daring to be negative about the show, even if they have a long track record of consistently praising most of Vivzy's work. And a lot of my friends and peers are genuinely afraid of speaking about the show in any capacity because of the kind of conversations it attracts, a feeling I shared after the Hell of a Boss fiasco last year. It's honestly insane how fast people will switch up on you if you have any sort of stance on the show. Positive or negative, neutral, haven't seen it. It's the most toxic discourse surrounding a cartoon I've seen in years. People will disagree with you on anything you have a stance on, it's a fact of life, but Hazbin Hotel is a topic where you just cannot win. With that aside though, I'm happy that Hazbin Hotel exists and it has every right to do so with the amount of work it took to get here. But criticism is still important, and I just wish the show got the chance to really spread its wings and flesh out its story and characters without it feeling like there was a bomb to go off in the writer's room. So yeah, I liked it, and I probably recommend it if you can tolerate a lot of it, but I can't say my expectations were met or exceeded, and I hope now some of you can understand why. That's the end of the video. I spent a long time trying to get this to work, so I don't have a proper ending. Play Yakuza, please.